Oh, we can lose your badge too if you want. That's over there.
Oh, thank you. It totally works.
Nice.
That's on LinkedIn.
Perfect.
Okay, what's up? Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. Sorry we're a little bit late. We had a couple things going on. Andrew was a little bit busy. He had a busy day, filmmaking, doing a lot of activities. And as you know, with anything in production, there's always a lot of stuff always going on. So thank you, Andrew.
No, JP, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to kind of go through this and talk about our experiences.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. And so if anybody, this is going to be kind of a low-key interactive session of us recapping NAB, what we did in Vegas, and just kind of going through our experience and talking about the interviews we did, things we saw, as well as also the live-to-air type activity we did around, as you saw in the pre-roll, powered by LiveU and Tagboard. That's what we used at Vegas, so We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And behind us, you'll see some pictures. We have a picture up here of the West Hall from the convention center. So, and if you see me going back and forth here, I'm actually kind of double fisting a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm being, and in Vegas, we had a remote operator. She was here in California, and that's actually where we're streaming live from. And I'll actually bring up our graphics before I forget, because shame on me.
Well, Well, it's not like you don't have 5 other things that you're trying to do.
Yeah,
at the same time,
exactly. I know. I seem to get this. I seem to do this. It just seems to be part of my deal. So we're live on LinkedIn. If anybody's watching this, interact and give us any live chats or anything that you want to ask about as we go through things. Feel free to contribute and talk about that. We're also live on YouTube, so I'll be trying to go back and forth and check on the chats and do that as well. So you'll see actually right now we actually have my lower third graphic. I'll go ahead and bring that down, and we will go ahead and bring up Andrew. And that's the beauty of this production that we kind of did in Vegas was, and we'll jump that in just a moment, but is be able to push these graphics live, and that's actually what the operator did while we were streaming, doing a live interview, and throughout the entire event. So that's the beauty, I think, of kind of the lightweight production story.
And I agree. I think that, when you look at something like a simple setup like what we had, where I'm walking around with just a backpack on, this camera and a monopod, and being able to have that operator anywhere in the world be able to push the graphics. So, even though I guess we were spoiled a little bit, being able to do it just from the desk, even in the middle of the podcast, is really, it's one of the things that's great about the whole concept and the idea of the lightweight production. It's one of the things that I love about it.
No, it is, and I think it's probably, we're going to jump back into kind of into the meat of the whole process that we kind of worked on in talking about the production and what we did. So, this session, or kind of this interaction, this live event, is kind of a 30-minute discussion. We'll leave the archive up, and you can ask follow-up questions if you don't, if there's something that comes up, and doing that. So let me jump over to our show notes and make sure that I'm on track with you, and checking that out right now. And fortunately, there we go. Okay, so obviously, thank you to Andrew. You're a big help. That was huge. Thank you to Rachel, who can't help today because of her own schedule. She was our remote operator. I just want to give a round of applause and thank you to Andrew, to Rachel, and to others, to the LiveU team, to Michael from LiveU, Sky from Tagboard, to the Tagboard team. Yeah, right. A lot of people contribute behind the scenes, and I want to give the accolades to the people because it's more than just, as any of us who've been on camera or doing certain events and activities, and even behind the scenes, is that it takes a team to make this all come together. And we pulled some elements together, not in the last minute of anything, but there were some things that we had to kind of manage, and we'll talk about that. But we also ended up doing a live stream event, and we'll talk about that as well. So thank you. I appreciate that.
But wait, let's not discount what you did. Okay, let's be honest here. Okay, so JP's just being a little too humble right now, and so I can speak to that. You organized everything, got everybody in line, ran that part of it. When simple little issues came up, you jumped on it. You had the contacts, you had the schedule, you built all this out. I mean, I wish that in the 30 years that I've been doing production that I had someone as organized as this on everything. So please accept that. Plus, you're great on camera, so that also makes it. You make the people that you're interviewing super comfortable, and they don't come off stiff because you're just having a conversation. Yeah, and that's an art.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I enjoy doing it. Thank you. And it's been, one of the goals I've had is to kind of get back and doing some of these live conversations. I'd love to have people, those who are watching and even catch the archive, give some input, right? There's always things that I look at that I do when I've done interviews, and that was one of my goals with my YouTube channel, just as a content creator and starting during the pandemic, was to do these live interactive type, or I guess record, but get to the point where we could do live, right? And I always kind of use the analogy, there's a forcing action when we're trying to do things. And I think that was one of the goals that I had for NAB, is like, you and I talked about this before the event, and I was talking with others, is like, let's just go for it. Right. Like, let's see what we can do, knowing that, we'll keep it low key to a degree, but make sure that we can accomplish the goals that we want to try to achieve.
And I think we did. I certainly think we did. We when we talked about proof of concept, I mean, without a doubt, proof of concept was there. So absolutely,
totally. Okay, so I want to jump into some highlights from NAB. Now, this is kind of like, if you went to NAB, you kind of know this already. If you didn't go to NAB, does this stuff really matter in terms of the show? I think one of the items I saw posted on LinkedIn recently, just this week, was the fact that people were talking about, where is NAB as the show going? What's the impact of financial constraints for travel and things like that? Without a doubt, I'm just going to hit some highlights here. Is that for sure the show wasn't completely different. What I would say is that the attendance was around 55,000 when we got the notes from the NAB team when they posted that. They had attendees from around 160 countries, and that the goal of the show was to kind of talk about the future of evolving media, right? Where things are going, AI,
right,
content creators, right? I think that was there's a large part of that was done previously in 2024, including this year.
And I think that AI really, what I felt, this is my 4th NAB, and I feel like that every year there's kind of this overarching, focus. I think last year was a lot of virtual production, LED walls.
Yep.
And I think AI really hit this year
yep.
in a lot of ways, and it was interesting to see. But, you talked about being different. The physical layout of the facility was different because
yes.
they had some construction going on.
Right.
So that was
yeah.
something to get used to. Is, for those of us who have been there a few times,
yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go into the Central Hall. And
yeah.
Central Hall was under construction, so it was a lot of
this is all over the place.
I mean, 25,000 steps a day was not unheard of.
Yeah, I thought last night when I was putting this together, when I was putting this show together, and some of the show notes I was thinking, I had a buddy of mine I worked with in the tech industry, and he said, at the end of the day when we did events, he said, my dogs are barking. Right?
Yeah.
And I think, no, that's no doubt. So it's without a doubt. The back and forth. The previous year they were doing construction in the North Hall.
Right.
This year they've moved to the Central Hall, and that was shut down. So it was West, North, and South, as well as some off-site locations throughout the hotels in the area. But what we discovered was take advantage of the loop, right? The Tesla loop
absolutely.
that goes underneath. I mean, that by far saves a huge amount of time.
Right.
For us going back and forth when we had to do interviews or meet up with people.
And there was a lot of that just because of the nature of where everybody was situated, because, they break it up as in, genres, for lack of a better term, where, you have your filmmaking world and, Cinecentral kind of a thing, and then you have your live streaming people and et cetera. And so, just by the nature of working with their schedules, we were bouncing a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think it was just the first day that we hoofed it the whole time, and then after that we're like, there's the loop right there. Let's try that.
I think we kind of went back and we kind of thought about it, and we said, that no doubt that was kind of something that was key to make sure that we had some things going on there. So I totally agree with you that that was one of the items that we were try to focus on and do and go from there. So and on that one, and so So there was a loop, and there were some things. I think the other part, I looked through the notes from NAB. I also want to take a moment before I jump ahead of myself. I also want to say thank you to the NAB team. One of the things that we did, that Andrew and I worked on, that I coordinated on, was that I had done previously at NAB, was we had media passes. Right. And that makes your job easier when you got to do live interviews. And I want to give a shout out to the NAB team. To the people in the press room, in the media room.
They were phenomenal. What was it? Was it Leo?
Something, yeah.
Leo was awesome. He knew, and by the end of the first day, he knew every person's name, greeted them personally.
Yep.
They had food out for us in there, and yeah, you really feel welcomed when you walked in.
You do.
I think probably one of the best, though, was the fact that we could check gear.
Yeah.
Because, you and I are both of the same mind. We're like, we're going to over-prepare, so we're going to go in with a ton of gear, and to have to carry that around would have been a nightmare. But instead, this is what we're working with, right?
That's it. I mean,
it's something that simple, but we could store everything. So yeah, you're right. They got the passes to us super quick. They got us all the access we needed. It was great. They were fantastic. Yeah,
it made life a whole lot easier. And I just want to give a shout out to the NAB show team, to the press team, to everybody at the show. There's a lot of work that goes into this event, and to the media. And there's other people that I knew being there inside there from previously past couple times. So I was really very thankful and privileged that they helped support us in doing that, and they take care of everybody in the show. So a shout out to the NAB team in doing that. So jumping back to our show notes, I said, basically, they had 55,000, 160 countries there. The NAB show featured 1,100 global exhibitors. They said 125 of those were first-time visitors. So I think there was a lot of first-timer But they also had global brands that included Adobe, AWS. Right. AWS has been there before. Yep. AT&T, Canon, Cisco, Dell. I think it was interesting. Actually, I'm going to hit on Dell and Microsoft as an example. The previous year, if I recall correctly, Microsoft didn't have much of a presence, but this year they actually had a bigger presence. So I think what was interesting was to see this convergence. This is going back to somebody posting a note on LinkedIn about what's changing in NAB. I think what we're seeing more now we talk about AI, is more inclusion of technology companies like Dell, HP, Microsoft, and others that realize media plays a big part of the business and the customers they support.
And there's a big push this year that I saw a lot of too was about storage and cloud-based storage.
Right.
So
thank you.
I think that you're absolutely right. When you're dealing with those companies, there was you'd be walking around and you'd see multiple representation of again, cloud-based and on-prem storage companies and things like that. So yeah, it was definitely interesting. It was definitely different. At least it felt like it was different. And kind of touching on what you said is what I found interesting is there were companies that had a bigger presence this year than past years, but the same was true the other way. So there were companies that you were expecting to go in and see this massive space that they would have, and they're much different. And there was a lot of these companies that are putting on kind of how would you say it, like almost staging visuals for crowds to try things out, from cameras to lighting and stuff like that. So you kind of get a more real world feel of things, and I always find that interesting. So it goes away from the static talking to somebody in a booth to being able to touch and feel and see the environment in a little bit more of a real way.
Totally. No, I think that's true, and I think that is kind of a change up that I saw. I agree with you, and I'm sure others that I know that I've worked with, that was with that I've talked to that were at the show, was without a doubt, it did seem a lot of the vendors that typically would have a larger presence had smaller booth sizes. Some made decisions strategically, being financially related, maybe cut down a number of people that are in the booth, their own staff. I think that's one of the challenges that we're seeing in the industry as a whole, right across the board, regardless of NAB. I think is the budget constraints, being more financially smart about how you spend those resources. But going back to your point, if they are going to show something, be strategic about what they want to talk about. And I think on storage, that's another one with S&S or some of the other ones. LucidLink was a big one. I think there's a big discussion around post-production of this collaborative effort between using tools like LucidLink and others that give, or Frame.io, that create this cross-collaboration around post-production. You capture it live or otherwise, and then kind of have the store forward type approach of the business of then getting your editors. And so LucidLink was doing quite a bit at the show. So I think that was another interesting part to see. There's the live element in broadcasting, and then there's post-production type stuff.
And that is one of those things that I just love about going to NAB, is that I've met so many people across the board with different everything from, you'll go to see Panasonic Lumix and see what those guys are doing, but then, you're right, you can go and hang out with somebody from Dell or somebody from Microsoft, and you can go and talk to them. Plus, AWS. So there was also the business side of the industry that was represented there as well. Yep. And, I always find that kind of a thing interesting. I mean, to the point where, one of our last shots was right in front of that giant production truck. And we were surprised at the fact that there was still that kind of representation there.
There is. I think that's one of the changes that we see, across the board. No, that good point. We did one final, and I'll jump to the other key points of what we accomplished, but one final live show type element from the South Hall. And so there's this, I looked at Andrew and I said, oh, look, there's this, and it's not that, broadcasting trucks or trailers, those things don't continue. They do, but I think, to me, this is just my observation, but somebody that's coming from a different side of the business. I came into streaming and webcasting and production from a technology background, right? I worked with Microsoft and the Intels and the Dells and AWSs of the world, right? So we had things, but to see the transition, and then to see where things as the technology comes in, video over IP, right? Cloud production, a lot of discussion around this that changes the scope. I think some of the effort of where traditionally do you do a large event and invest in a big truck,
right?
Or do you do what we're doing here to offset some of that cost and be smart about it?
And I think one of the great experiences, it was when we were going up that escalator at one point, is somebody was asking like, well, what are you doing? What is that backpack? And I mean, maybe it's me, maybe it's me, but there were times where I would be walking around and you'd see somebody with these big giant production carts and all of this stuff and 6 people working the event, and I'd kind of giggle because there I am walking by with this, and then
True.
and then that's how we were putting the production together.
No,
and then
totally.
with Rachel back here, and so I always think that was a great conversation to have with a lot of people.
Yep.
Was how we were doing it, and I think there was a growing interest in that.
There was. I think that a lot of people stopped us. I mean, not that they didn't know, maybe somebody didn't know who LiveU was, but I think they saw that, and I think to your point, a lot of people asked what we were doing, and I said, we've got to get to a point where we're efficient, and I think in terms of the ground, what I call the ground to cloud type scenario, and this, we'll get into that here in a moment. But I think to close out on NAB, they had a sports summit, a big focus on sports, esports, business of entertainment, right? Looking at where things are going there. So there's some things, if you go on the NAB website and their media, they've posted a lot of this information. So, going back to your point about our efforts, and with this is that, our goals for the show were to attend and support. We kind of covered that already. Media passes, we talked about that as well. Come ready with a lightweight production. That's what you see right here posted in Andrew's photo, and doing that. And
then, this is one of the cases that we used it, and you can kind of see how simple it is.
Yeah.
And, again, this is the same part of the West Hall. And you talk about, a focus on esports and how multiple companies are now coming together, right?
Yeah.
So we got a chance to speak to Sky at Tagboard, who was working with AWS on a racing simulator.
Oh, yeah.
Which was crazy. So you have all these things, and then you throw us into the mix, and, we were able just to be on the floor with it all in the background. Yeah. And it was just a simple production for us to run right from there.
It really was. In fact, this is where Sky and I were talking about lightweight production, because Tagboard's had some involvement with LiveU, and, we've done some, and that's part of the setup. But the setup for the West Hall with the esports, with Formula One, this has been a big part of, how do you create better engagement online with your audience?
Right.
How do you do that? And so the big partnership they had with at the show with AWS, NVIDIA. The interesting part about this, about their setup, I think it was interesting that I did kind of just a quick peek on, it was that the team helping kind of run what they were doing here was actually over in the AWS booth. So they actually had a team there that was kind of helped drive that along with the Tagboard team. So it was great to kind of just, talk with Sky about this, but absolutely, exactly.
And there's the booth that they were running it from.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So they were running that, and they had all the cameras, and they would do, periodically there. Low light for me, I'm a big Formula One fan. I wanted to do what Sky said, hey, we got to get you on there, and it's like, next time, Sky. Yeah. But I want to thank you to Sky for all his help and contribution on that one and doing that. So, we met up, we did the live stream in the West Hall. We came ready for what we talked about, the production, meet up with folks, obviously like everybody does at NAB.
Right.
And doing that. But, so the question comes back to your point what you said earlier is, did we make it? Yes.
Yes.
Right. We did exactly what we envisioned that we wanted to try to do. Yep. And that ended up being 5 live spots that we did throughout the convention center from west to south. We did that throughout the week, and some of these I've actually been posting throughout this week on LinkedIn, on YouTube, where I took the live interviews and just edited them for Broadfield and Jim and Sky.
Jim from
exactly
Broadfield there, and
yep.
Then we got that was our first one that we did, right?
That was our first one.
And
yeah.
That was a bit of our litmus test, for lack of a better term, and I thought it went great,
Yep.
And then we had when we met with
Chris from Elgato.
Elgato,
Yeah, that was a cool one. And actually, we had our goal was to go actually interview Chris on Sunday.
Right.
We, like any production, we ran into a couple of challenges, but that's what, to go back to Andrew's point, you create a backup plan to know how you can pivot and circle around it. And so we came up with an alternative path, thanks to Andrew, and it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, and thanks to Chris for being so flexible. He was, you know,
Yeah.
we just ran out of time at that moment for us to go back to the West Hall for me to change out the gear that I needed and to hoof back. But you know, he was so gracious about it and so welcoming for us, and really cool guy and fun to talk to, and really awesome gear, and some of the changes that they're putting in, the customizations that they're putting in, I really dig. So you know, I was enjoying that. So
no, I think that was perfect, and so I think, you know, we had a lot of good, you know, kind of that worked out well for us at the end of the day. So thank you to Chris and everything else in doing that. And then at the same time, we did the interviews. We accomplished those goals. Lots of meetups. Using the loop, we talked about that was a must, right? Getting back and forth. The lessons we learned, I kind of like, you know, I think anytime we do live events and you kind of look at that, is there's always going to be lessons, that takeaways that we say, oh, we could have done this differently. Andrew and I would talk at the end of the day.
Right.
Kind of just go through this. After NAB, we had another discussion of like, how could we approach this differently? And doing that, you know, next time around.
And I think that what that allows us to do, though, is not only be prepared, but I think that with those proofs of concept, I think that we even expanded relationships between all of us, you know. So I mean, people like Chris I had never met before, and you know, now he's looking to work with us here. And what a great experience that was, you know.
That was cool.
And things like, you know, you got a chance to go and head over to the Win and
I
check
did.
out, you know, I mean, this was just sick, you know.
This was cool,
you know, to get over and to be able to see the podcast studio for for Sirius XM. You know, it just all of those experiences adding up to. I like the way you say it. It was a successful event. We went out there with an idea. We went out there with this concept of how can we make this happen, and you know, we did. I have personally very limited experience prior to this with LiveU.
And we kind of got a crash course here.
But it was great. And you know, by the end of it, it's like, oh, you know, here's the backpack, and I'm going to go hook it up and do all that. And, you know, JP would come out of his trailer with talent, you know, with the towel wrapped around his neck and the Perrier and
nice.
all that.
I wish. It'd be so awesome.
That would be great.
It would have been awesome. In fact, I was going to make a note of it. Sky mentioned when I was editing the interview and going through this, Sky goes, I've always wanted to be on your channel. And I'm like, and I kind of just skipped past what he said in my mind. And I thought, wait a minute, dude, I should be thanking you for the compliment, because it's my appreciation of you know, I'm just a solo guy doing this. So this was cool. Mike Cavanaugh from Key Code. This is over in the South Hall. This was great.
Great guy to talk to, and you know, we had a good experience again. You know, he was the fun one with this one was we had people that were standing right. You know, talk about fun with live. People that were standing right next to him. Just like, I don't know what they were babbling about and making noise, and it was like, I'm trying to figure out. Okay, can I usher them away being polite, or, you know, however it is. And it was great because it was Mike who caught it. He just kind of looked over his shoulders, let's move this way.
Mike was very gracious in what he did. We were, and these are things you learn with live, folks. I mean, at the end of the day, if we had somebody there to kind of help steer people away, great. You know, that helps a lot. But there's a lot of times people just would walk in front of the camera, or somebody's encroaching, and Andrew's kind of having his hand, like I think with Chris, you know, somebody comes in and people don't, it's not, you know, people are they're curious. They're curious. They're at the show, or they're coming into a booth and they've got an objective. Totally respect that. At the same time, you know, so it's kind of one of those things you just try to manage it. But but it goes back to the same thing, right? So when you have a technical issue that you just don't, you know, plan for in the moment, right? You punt and you do something else. It's the same thing here, right? And at the heart of it is, if somebody walks in front of you and you're talking to Mike, does it really change it? No, it's almost something that we can giggle about, right? And especially in the moment of live, you know. And so I think that is one of those things. Again, you go back to the lightweight, right? Like, I think if I would be much more frustrated if I'm hauling a cart full of gear, and setting it all up, and then going, okay, well, this cable went bad, or this happened, or that happened, or somebody interrupted the shot. Whereas with the lightweight, it makes it so much easier because you're just in the moment, and I think it comforts, for lack of a better term, and puts people at ease, because it's just
me standing there with a camera and you talking to them. It's a conversation, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a big garish mic in front of them. You're just having a conversation.
That's it. I think at the end of the day, it really is about having that, kind of just having that discussion, and that was kind of the goal. And you can go see here, we did keep things at a minimum to just try to help people be at ease, because a lot of times, they're rushing, they've got things going on in their schedules. Mike's a busy guy. He's the president, and founder, co-founder of Keycode Media. So, he's got things going on. Jim's got things going on. And we want to be respectful. We want to try to help enable them to be able to do that. So Mike was great. And in fact, I went to the Keycode app post NAB show last week in Los Angeles at the Sheraton Universal. It was great to meet up with some of the team and meet up with some of the vendors that were at NAB. So thank you again to Mike. And if Mike sees this by chance, thank you again, Mike, for your time and everything. So we really, really do appreciate that. So we did that, lots of good interviews. I think on the other ones we had Chris, we had Jim, we had Mike, we had Dan from Epiphan, Scott from Osprey.
So there was...
there we go.
Yep. So
sweet.
That was with Epiphan. And then that was some of the gear from
Elgato.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. There's a shot of the... this is really cool. So Tagboard kind of, and Monk, say that correctly, another group, the team there that I met up with, they kind of were doing live podcast shows over in the SiriusXM. So thank you again to Sky and to the team for letting me come and hang out for a little bit and kind of see the operation. Yeah. So this was actually really cool. Yeah. This is actually, for if you haven't seen this before, if you go over to the Wynn Hotel, I just happened to jot down from after a meeting, but I said I'll stop by. They have this podcast studio that they've built at the Wynn Hotel. That's part of SiriusXM. And so this is their operational room, and the other shot you saw was in the studio. There's a green room kind of set up they had outside of this room, and as well as the outside shot where you're walking by, going down in the hotel, and you see through the glass. And so they do a lot of sports podcasts and different things. So they had Tagboard, different companies doing podcasts throughout the week in NAB. So that was really cool to kind of see what they had put together. We
got a chance to talk to Tony and a couple of the other guys over at Viltrox too. And
yes,
I've met Tony a couple of years ago at NAB, and he and I became fast friends. And then we went over and I just basically, again, talk about the beauty of lightweight production, right? And what we were trying to accomplish. Our idea was just I just wanted to go over and say hi to him, right? Yeah. Because we were working a couple booths down.
Yep.
And in the conversation, you're kind of like, hey, you want to film? Sure. And so, he got us hooked up with
Frank.
Frank, who was his boss, and said, come on by. And, we just popped in the next day when they had time, scheduled some time, and we got, a great interview with him. I think you just made that live recently.
I did.
Right?
I did post a video. I'll have something else coming out, but one of the final interviews that we did, or in conjunction between live and capturing. So there was, 5 live spots we did, and then we did like 4 different, filmed where we kind of went in there and did the interviews, like with Frank from Viltrox. And so that was a great opportunity. I don't typically cover, but with Andrew being there at the show, it kind of counterbalances, I think, to see some of the things. And so Frank's standing there talking about the lens. It's like, hey, wait a minute, I've seen this lens, right? If anybody goes on YouTube, look at Gerald and Dunn and others out there, they've actually used this lens in the Sony world with the camera. So that video just went out today. So thank you to Viltrox and to Frank and everything for his time. I think it's great. Hopefully, we have some other opportunities in the future to talk with those guys and everything else. I love their booth, by the way.
Yeah, it was great.
Their booth, and if anybody knows JP, I'm a big coffee fanatic, as he knows.
Yep.
And so on the other side of that, they had a great espresso bar.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, I was envying that's just me. And so.
But I think it broke the ice and it opened up that conversation, right, with Frank. And it's that kind of thing that I think makes this, a much more comfortable experience for them, because, they're not, for lack of a better term, they're not just spouting the company line. They're having a conversation with somebody about something that they're interested in.
Totally.
And I think that really benefited us a lot in that process.
I did. Yeah. This benefited. I think that totally, absolutely 100% agree with you. And, even with Elgato talking about the Stream Deck Studio rack-mounted solution with Chris, and he actually brought up a couple other features in their products that, again, I posted that video on my YouTube channel, and I posted updates on LinkedIn. around the surface, the PoE injector. We call them basically to power a Stream Deck through a different process in doing that. So a lot of great interaction, and I think it was great. That's the beauty of NAB is if you take advantage of it, right, and you look for the opportunities. You can do exactly what we're kind of talking about here and just have that active discussion.
And even things like, I mean, as an indie filmmaker and as a film instructor, where I kind of geek out is, the professional film world in, people that I like their work. And so, I got a chance to head over to ASC and talk to, DPs that were over there and, Shelley Johnson, the head of the ASC is over there. And just hanging out in the booth just like anybody else. You would if you didn't know who he was, you would just think he's a guy who's just there to rep. And those are the experiences, getting hands-on with some gear that you may not necessarily have tried before, really utilizing it as an opportunity to test out some things, to meet the people. Totally. And every single year that I've gone, I've met a new connection. And I think that's really rad because you get that chance to foster those and build those out and work with people that you really enjoy. I mean, that's how you and I met, actually. We met at NAB. We did. In the Panasonic Lumix booth. We did. Because we had a mutual friend. Yes. And he introduced us, and then, 3 years later or whatever it is, here we are, right?
I know. I'm a bit astonished by the fact that and as Andrew just brought that up, because there's a lot of interactions, you do have these opportunities, and we did. And super thankful. Thank you. That's
I had a blast. Honestly, I had a blast doing it. It was a lot of work. It was long hours. It was a lot of walking. But at the end of the day, I went back to the hotel and I felt, accomplished. I felt like we did something really fun and cool, and we got to try it out. And it kind of led into some other things that we had talked about doing, frankly, right after that. So I thought that was kind of fun to see.
No, that was, and actually, let's go ahead and jump to that part. So after kind of the post NAB. Oh, before I forget, lots of great interviews. What would I've liked? What did I miss? I was thinking about this last night that I felt in myself. And before we jump to this next point that Andrew's going to bring up on what we did after NAB was for sure the schedule. Like anything with NAB is crazy, and so I would have loved to stop by the Blackmagic booth. I had an intent. Lucid Link, we brought that up. Right. PTZ Optics, to Paul Richards and the team at PTZ Optics. I apologize. We were trying to get over there. Right. It just a lot of things that were going on. We were dealing with some other challenges. So
John at Atomos, we were hoping to get over.
Yeah, exactly. John from Atomos, and with PTZ, John with Atomos, because they announced some products there. At NAB, PTZ Optics was showcasing Hive, which is a way of remotely managing through cameras and controlling those, and they've got a great solution that they talked about the show, and so go check out what PTZ Optics is doing. There's other things that I would have liked, been great to go check out. So, we go back again and think about, like, hey, that'd be great to go and do that, because Blackmagic needs more announcements about some updates they've done. I still haven't gone back and watched the 2-hour webcast I think Grant did, for Blackmagic. So,
but I mean, what happened, right? I think it was the last day was the Wednesday we were there, and we were literally closing shop, right, with everybody as they're tearing out. Yep. And I think by the end of the week we were on the phone saying, okay, so next year when we go in, there was no like if we do this. It was next year when we go in. Here's how. Let's talk about scheduling now. And we're a year out, and I think that's really what I enjoyed about it is that. It gave me, I always look forward to NAB for all those connections and those networking opportunities to meet people, to make those connections for my students. Mm-hmm. But I'm really looking forward to just going out and doing this again because, it was just a fun experience overall to see how people talk about their products, talk about things they cared about, and the interactions. And, again, it was, I don't want to say it was easy, but it was pretty easy for what it was. I did live streaming on the technical end for years, and I used to dread some of those nights. Here, it's like, oh yeah, no problem, let's do it. Throw a backpack on, take one last sip of coffee, and then head on out.
That was it. That was it. And I think that was kind of the goal that we had, that we were thinking about was, trying to get through that process and understand what we needed to do, and kind of absolutely, I totally agree with you on that part of it. And the other part of it was live streaming can be wonky at times, right? No doubt about that. Sure. And in the midst of all the things that everything that we're doing now, there were some other activities going on that we'll have a picture of it in a moment before Andrew's going to bring up another point, is we ended up doing a live stream in West Hall on a Tuesday night.
Right.
Can't go into a lot of details, but what we did, we were pleased to support, again, a lightweight production, help them stream live to their YouTube. And so there was a lot of other coordination going on. Even when I get on show site, like anybody does production, I'm having to manage that part of the effort, do tech meetups, and so that was a lot of fun. Presented some challenges, but I think at the end of the day, we got it done, and in spite of some of the things that we were doing. So,
but I also think that one of the things that came out of it is that one of the organizers was really interested in seeing how we can work with them a little bit more, right? And so expanding that relationship and figuring it out. And again, that's one of those things where we walked in there and just said, this is our ideas, and trite but true, but it ain't our first rodeo, right?
Yeah.
So we have that experience. We know when we're walking in the door what we're looking at, and we understand efficiencies and things. And I think all of those pieces put together, it was a great event. It was something that I'm excited to support next year, and I believe that you've already had some conversations with the organizers about what we can do next year.
Yeah, I think that's gonna, and we're gonna jump into that one right now, in fact, and talk about kind of where the next point of our conversation around. We'll jump into lightweight production, but before I want to give, we did. One of the goals we had was around lightweight production. This was kind of like, I don't want to say a proof of concept, but it was a proof of concept because we wanted to really kind of. I think a lot of times we talk about the products. You go to NAB, for any of us that show up at the shows, see the products. There's a lot of conversations about how it works and whatever else happens. And so I think the goal that I have the previous year at NAB, where I had an opportunity to present in the LiveU booth, and then LiveU team graciously, had me on in a couple of different sessions, and we talked about lightweight production. But I think this year the discussion was, okay, let's take it and actually show it in action, right? And I talked about, my conversation with Jim from Broadfield did this last year at Infocom, that was also in Las Vegas, and we talked about that in their post-show event that they had me on. But the other part of this is say, okay, let's take and do it and coordinate some activities like we've talked about. So I think the lightweight production story is really valid, right?
Absolutely.
And because, is it going to do everything that we want it to do? No, there's elements there where it doesn't appropriately apply to it. But if we're trying to talk about the effort of a show, some type of effort where we can get this into a cloud production, that's a big focus of mine. Then, this is where with LiveU Studio, and I'll go into some of the details in a moment, but those are the things we look at. And then you've got, and after NAB.
Right. So literally a week after the last day of NAB, we put on the Monarch Film Festival at Mater Dei High School. So I'm aside from being an independent filmmaker, I'm also the director of the Film and Media program here. And, we had an opportunity to kind of work with these guys, and JP generously gave of his time along with Sky and LiveU to help us out, and we actually live streamed the event. And 77 students over 9 films, created 9 films. We had awards that went out. We had a ton of stuff that happened. We had all the different companies. MSI was really generous. Lumix was our marquee sponsor. We had Red Digital Cinema. Even local companies like Roxxon Tool that are out of Southern California were there, and I thought that was amazing, and it gave us a chance to highlight what we were doing and talk to our students and show off kind of their work. And it's the first time we ever did. It's our inaugural year, and I thought it was amazing. And you get these kids who they spend a lot of time, and basically every kid that you see in that photo there, they've been in the program for 4 years, and so this is kind of their honors level, and they're kicking out, and then this was it.
That was it. I mean,
there's the backpack and the camera, and
that's all we did. I mean, literally, it was the backpack. Now I had a backup to. First, thank you for the opportunity. We were pleased to help support that, and that was I think that was the goal to help Andrew, and it was a good success for him. I'll get that out in a moment, and to be able to help support the effort and what you're doing with the program. And it's a phenomenal program that Andrew has built, the relationship you have with Lumix and others. So super pleased that we were able to do it. You see Holly Line is in the background, many others that were part of the event. New York Film School.
New York Film Academy gave away almost $50,000 in scholarships. which they didn't even tell us. So
that's nice.
So my second in command, Kenny, and I were just sitting there with our jaws on the ground as they're going, the first $15,000 scholarship. We're like, what now? First?
Yeah.
You know, and no, it was great. And our vendors were super excited to be part of that. And I think that they saw it when our administrative team was there. Everyone in our administrative team was there except for one person who happened to be traveling, which was awesome to see when you'd look out and you know, this is a budding program. This really was started in 2016, and it's taken 9 years, but we got to here. And to see the support that we had from not only our vendors, but for someone like you to come in and give of your time and ask nothing in return, just to benefit the school, benefit the kids, benefit the program. You know, I can't thank you enough for that. And
that's my pleasure.
You know,
that was my
whether or not I should say this or not, we didn't, on our end, didn't advertise the stream as much as I would have liked, but we actually had more viewers than many of our other events that I've worked on in the past. And so I think that in and of itself was a success. You know, being able to see that, and you know, again, Tagboard doing some custom graphics for the stream and being able to work with that, and it was amazing. And I, you know, again, it was one of those situations where, you know, thank you, good night, we love you all, and then you and I are huddling in a corner going, okay, so next year when we do this, we're going to do that. Or
there were some things that, you know, and those are things, we kept the threshold low. I think it's the same thing with Vegas, right? We didn't want to go overboard because a lot of times you're trying to figure out where things are at. You want to plan as much as you can and test. So to your point, I think that was the key. And even with this setup that we were doing and trying just to kind of get up to speed on certain areas of what we were working on was, you know, you see the backpack, which is the LU800 from LiveU for our bonded encoder setup as a primary feed. I have a backup feed that I'm also with it using a Solo Pro. You know, the Solo Pros became our backup redundant option. We wanted to test it, put it into action, and I actually just posted something today around a series I've worked with LiveU on around the Solo Pro. So if you go sign up, it's free. But you know, the Solo Pros are becoming not so much the big broadcast encoders themselves, which are super beneficial, but for content creators and things like that, the Solo Pros just become really solid on that
I
point.
mean, for a single operator, it's great.
Yeah, no, it's like, okay, so, all right, let me take a look here and just double check on chats, make sure we're doing good here on time as we get going here. So I'm going to jump in real quick on, just to make sure I'm copacetic here.
The funny part is that as per usual with you and I, we plan for 30 minutes of conversation and we're at 45 or so.
We do. No,
that's always it. You know, we always have this is how every meeting we have goes. It's great.
No,
it's the beauty of working with somebody you enjoy working with.
Thank you.
You know?
No, it's mutual. It's reciprocal. Yeah. No, I totally agree. That was actually, Andrew and I had a blast.
Yeah,
it was fun. It was fun, right? You know, it's a lot of work, a lot of things to go on, but you know, it's great to collaborate with Andrew from his experience as a independent filmmaker and everything that he does in the space. So jumping into lightweight production, you know, so what was our setup for? I'm just going to kind of go through this for time efficiency's sake and to just cover what we did in our setup. Now, our setup, like you see here in the picture, for Vegas and even what we're doing was really simple. We used LiveU Studio for the cloud production and mix. Basically, that takes a live input from the backpack, goes into LiveU Studio, and then we mix everything in there. That includes all the Tagboard graphics you see and everything there. And in addition to that, we had the LU800, which you see there in the picture for the backpack. We had a Solo Pro. For comms, now this is a big thing for everybody in production when you're doing these live activity events. We actually used a product from our solution from LiveU called Audio Connect. Right. And that allows us as a cloud-based, there's two parts of Audio Connect. We used the cloud-based version, which allowed Rachel to communicate with us. And for Andrew to be on comms so that we could communicate in real time. She could let us know, hey, I started the live show, and just make sure and keep us on track for time and know when we're going to go live. Just, you know, kind of manage the conversation for a back-of-stage type view.
Right, yeah, and that was one of the great things is that, you know, when you have an off-site operator like that, being able to communicate in real time and have it be clear. There's no delays. There's no worries about any sort of thing like that. And,
totally.
I thought that was really great. And just Rachel did a phenomenal job keeping us on track and on time.
She did.
And,
She's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. No, she was fantastic.
Rachel did a fantastic job between this and the live stream event we had on Tuesday night and everything we're working on. So we had I won't go into a lot of details about this. If somebody wants to have another conversation, maybe we can talk about it another time. But one of the things with LiveU when we're streaming from here is there's the program feed that you're seeing with the graphics and everything being applied. The other beauty that we tested, or beauty of LiveU Studio, that we tested was the fact that we can take an ISO and get a clean capture without the graphics.
Right.
So a lot of the interviews I've gone and posted were taken from the ISOs and just repurpose those content. I think that's the beauty when you do these productions is that you can stream to YouTube, which we did, and you can leave your archive up there. But if you want to create some repurposing, if you will, of your content, which is key, right? That's the purpose of within LiveU Studios. They expand it to offer ISOs and replays and features that they're adding into the product, is to be able to take that, edit. And then also I took that in and put it into Opus Clips and create my short form video clips, right? And so, I think whenever he talks about live streaming and about that whole process in of itself, the big part of that is to say that, live streaming is one part of the process. The post-production effort of going back and creating some longevity in terms of your archives and things you post on YouTube or whatever platform you're using is key. And the other part of YouTube that we did as part of our setup is we used, going to get nerd out for a moment here, is we used SRT.
Right.
So both my YouTube channels, we streamed SRT. It's a way of more efficiently streaming directly into YouTube for reliability over the traditional RTMP type process. So thank you to the YouTube team, because previous to the Vegas trip, we were working out some details. So I want to give a shout out to the YouTube team and others that I know. Thank you for your help, and thank you to the LiveU team and support everybody that helped me kind of facilitate, put some things together. So we had that. As far as our setup was, we talked about this already. I was the host. Andrew was the cameraman. We had Rachel as the remote operator to mix the show in California. We had backup options for gear, camera, cables, the Solo Pro. If we needed, phones were used between Android and iPhones for the comms component with I talked about Audio Connect. Then we just added an intro and outro, right? Really simple, 3-minute countdown, 3-minute rollout, that type of a setup. Issues that we had to overcome, I would say that, we've already covered this throughout the show, like with any big convention center. Jim brought this up in our interview, was dead spots, right? When you're dealing with a building that's full of concrete, steel, and whatever, that was one of the other challenges. Yeah,
and you're always up against that when you're in a venue like that, and you're going any sort of cellular. It's just going to happen, and you're always going to be fighting. It's just like when you're in the heart of it. If your phone has no bars, then your bonded cellular is going to be slightly more limited, and so. Totally. But the thing again that I found was that was very limited. At no point did we ever start a stream and be like, okay, we all have to shift 8 feet over this way to make sure we still have signal. And I thought that even with those challenges, we never found ourselves having to go into the lobby. We could be in the heart of it.
Yeah. No, I think overall everything worked. Right now, we preface that with test. Right.
Yes.
In any of the LiveU tutorials and things we talk about, even just my experiences as a whole for live streaming, test and planning are really key to that. So we did do some testing. We did walk through in the convention center on a Saturday before NAB started, pre-NAB, and Andrew and I with Rachel online on the comms. We just walked across the convention center in different spots to get a kind of an idea of where, if we were in a certain spot, good or bad, what have you. And so we identified, at least preliminary wise, what we needed to do, and then just pivot, right? I use the term pivot, plan. If we ran into an issue, we just adapted. We tried to overcome that. I mean,
something as simple as we were walking across streaming, and I think I bumped somebody or whatever, and it jacked up one of my cables, and so we had to figure that out, right? And it was a simple process, and we changed it out, and everything's good, right? But exactly, it's just pivoting in the moment and figuring it out. But again, when you're not worried about oh my gosh, something happened. Now I have to yank this component out and pop this other component into my giant rack. It's like, okay, cool. We have a backpack. We're a solo pro, and we're doing what we need to do. And it's simple and easy to just
do it.
Just to figure it out. Run up to the press booth and grab another thing, head on down to the interview.
Yeah, I think that was the beauty. We had a strategy of where, that if we ran into a problem, we went back to the press room. We just regrouped, looked at it, do the technical breakdown, make sure we're good to go. Everything's copacetic. So I think that was key. And so
JP had his 30-second cup of coffee in that.
I did have my. Yes, I did. I tried to go to the Dunkin' Donuts. The Dunkin' Donuts there in West Hall. I don't know. Everybody was there, right? It's a busy spot. So I tried to run to the Dunkin' Donuts. I tried to run down from the press room because the press media room was in the West Hall this year. As opposed to last year, I think it was over between North and Central, or wherever it was at. So I ran to there, and so the Dunkin' Donuts. So for me, it's like, okay, run down there, do that, and then they had coffee in the media room. So I'm not going to whine about it. So yeah. So, I don't want to take up a whole lot more time just to kind of keep us focused on what we're doing here. But one of the things I will bring up to you that if you want to learn more about this, I'm going to bring up a QR code. If you scan this QR code, it's going to take you to a live web page that I set up before NAB. Now, what this is around lightweight production. So if you're interested about learning more, if you scan the QR code, you go to this website page, you can fill out some information, and I will follow up with you, right? Myself and LiveU and anybody else, Tagboard, what have you, I always say this in every interview I did, like if you have questions, ask, right? And do that, right? Share your comments, share your feedback, good or bad, what have you. But, go here. This is something I've been working on. That was part of the goal that we had for Vegas, and we want to continue on. But it's not just Vegas itself. I've done other things with, other events and activities where we've had a lightweight production type activity that I did previously. So if you're, scan the code, let me know. I'd love to have your input and get those thoughts on that part of it. Now jumping into, and I'm just going to check chats real quick because I want to keep on time because I have no idea. This is kind of my gripe for it right now on LinkedIn. YouTube's a little bit more forgiving, but with LinkedIn live streaming, you never really know that if you hit the mark, the time limit, will LinkedIn drop you? And this is a kind of a test I'm doing right now because we didn't stream to LinkedIn on purpose. No knock against the LinkedIn team. I know the operations team, great folks. But one of the challenges that I would like to see LinkedIn do is be a little bit more like YouTube.
Yeah.
That would help. Just kind of make a little more flexibility on some of that.
Right. Yeah.
But
no, you're right.
This is JP whining. This is me.
JP first world problems.
Exactly. JP first world problems. That's exactly right. So we've kind of covered the interviews. We kind of talked about that. Everything I've put on the JP Chalk Talks YouTube channel. I've posted on LinkedIn. We can show some more if we have. We've talked about the film festival. There's things around the show that we talked about, Elgato and different things that we saw. That was exciting to see that. And then, I think kind of hitting on the note here, the final note, I would say, like, what's next? Well, there's more to share soon. We want to kind of continue this effort. I kind of put that QR code on purpose because I want to get some input, but I think this is a real opportunity. Everybody's talking right now about budgets, and as Andrew and I have kind of covered this.
Right.
Listen, budgets and financial planning is critical to what needs to happen. I think for event professionals and many people that are involved in this process right now, and with tariffs and things that are all kind of the crazy that's going on at the moment, I think it's time to take a step back, take what we did from a lightweight production story, right, and look at ways and how we, from a technical perspective and what we do. But how we can be more effective and help accomplish the goal. And I think that's the key, is to make sure that we're doing things that will be supportive to help clients. That's my goal.
Right.
And do that. And with Andrew, as we talked about things even after the event, I think that's a key in my mind. What stands out is, like, guys, cloud production's real.
Right.
We can make this happen. If you go check out the Office Global Hours team's YouTube channel with Alex Lindsay and the team, they've done some phenomenal things. They were at NAB. Alex was doing some stuff. I met up with CJ and some of the other guys on the team, so it was great to. Previously, last year, they had a booth there at the event. So I think Alex is doing some stuff. We're all talking about the same meta message, so to speak.
Right.
But I think we're at a point now in terms of technology and what we're doing in production-wise, we can facilitate an effective, good quality setup and get and accomplish the goal, hopefully.
I think so. Yeah, I agree. I think it was much smoother than I anticipated. And I think you're right. I think that, again, that cloud-based production was a major element of what we saw at NAB from vendors and from manufacturers. And I think that you're right. I think it's just one of those things that, just like AI, you learn how to use it and advance, or someone else who does is going to take the job.
Yeah, I think that's, at the end of the day, the tools in the tool bag, so to speak. I think I posted a clip this week on around with regards to air and everything else. Mm-hmm. So, we talked about AI tools. So it is really, truly what's in the tool bag and what's happening. So I think at the end of the day, we all want to be effective in our roles and our jobs, knowing that the industry is changing, knowing technology is coming in. So the goal is to say, not is AI replacing my job, is as much as what are the tools in AI for me to improve and leverage to do my job better.
Right.
Still, as Nick said, from advanced robotics cameras, use the creativity that we have. It's not going to replace the person.
Exactly.
Right, per se. It's the creativity of what we do in our space from a filmmaking perspective, live production, live streaming, what have you, is all still critical because it's the person behind the camera or whatever's being done that is adding their visual to tell that story.
But having the tools, so I recently started working with a company called LiveU Stage. They actually help support us at the film festival as well. And I got into several conversations with people at NAB about them. And what they've essentially done is given us a tool to take a lot of the, how would you say it, the tedious work out of pre-production. Those things that you have to do in order to have a successful production through analyzation. And I think that's where we're going to see it. It's not, again, no one's losing a job over that. But if I can be X percentage more efficient in my pre-production, I'm getting that job.
Yeah,
as opposed, totally. And I think that that's really where, you're right. I think you're 100% right with the cloud-based, because you really introduced me to cloud-based production in terms of this and control in a way that I never had an opportunity to work with it, and it was fascinating. And I had conversations with friends of mine. You had met my friend Brian, who knows a great deal about Livestream, and he loved it, and he even said, let's talk afterwards about how this works, and he really was impressed with what LiveU did with having the LiveU 800 out there.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that's the beauty of this whole effort is the discussion is around, the tools in the tool bag is what I always have kind of shared with people that we put into doing that. And I think the interesting part with LiveU and other solutions that way, there's an opportunity that I think it's happening in the market space. LucidLink's involved in this and different things, and LiveU was in the LucidLink booth. But one of the things is that I see as an opportunity is that when we do these productions, like we're live streaming, like what we're doing at the show, is the kind of store forward kind of illustration of having that go into a tool like a LucidLink or others where you can then have your editors collaborate in real time. The reality is, if anything, COVID taught, lessons learned from COVID and the pandemic was the fact that, yes, there was this upside down world issue going on, but the reality was also showing us from a life lesson example of how do we do things differently? How do we improve what we're doing, right? And how do we give people that are remote, if we're not all in the same location, how do we create that collaboration? And I think, again, it goes back to whether it's Paul Richards or Hive and PTZ Optics or a lot of the other guys there, we're all talking about the same story in a way of the narrative and the illustration. But I think what we're really trying to hit on is that, look, there are ways to more efficiently get things done, leverage the expertise of a great editor, it was in filmmaking or whatever it may be, and create that real-time pivoting of speeding it up, right, and being able to then take that content and get it out, put on the social media channels, whatever you need to do.
Well, that's what it is. And one of the things that I teach with my students is you know, that pace is increased from when we were kids, right? The stuff that we learned in high school is not what these students are learning, what I have to teach, because their lives revolve around 30 to 60 seconds, right? And you know, it's the guppy generation, basically, you know, and so being able to make things more efficient and to move things forward in a way that's going to allow us to produce more. You're 100% right. You know, again, I don't think that emotionally entertainment's ever going to go to a point where we're going to completely replace humans with AI, because there's that human element that you cannot tell through a robot yet. You know, and at that point, you know, when that happens, then just befriend them because they're taking over.
Yeah, pretty much. You know? It's either somebody said to me this week, there's two things I'll take away and add on to that. I laughed at it. I think, and it's like, well, I'm not throwing anybody under the pointing something out here from a cultural perspective. I can either be like the Amish, right, and completely isolate myself from the rest of the world, right, or I can step outside knowing that these things are continuing. That's just how technology works.
Exactly.
Right. At the end of the day, if anything I've learned from it, in working with the likes of Microsoft and Intel and countless technology companies, technology is about innovation and about driving change. Right. And that is really kind of the key part of this whole process. The question is like, how do you manage that change? How do you leverage that innovation to value what you're doing in your respective career, role, whatever it might be?
100%.
So I think you're, you know, to your point, and I think that at the same time, we just got to get to the point where we can have this open discussion. Listen, Skynet is not coming in at the moment. At least I hope not. I don't know, but you know. So, but at the end of the day, I think you bring up a good point, Andrew. Is that you know, look, leverage it. Let's work together. Let's figure out ways. We know that these tools, from an AI perspective and where AI is going, managing that change is in terms of the people have, in terms of the best practice and doing things in a right way and effective, that creates positive change, knowing at the same time there are going to be times where there are speed bumps in the road.
Exactly.
Right. And it's how you manage that change. That's kind of the key thing there. So
I agree.
Okay, jumping back real quick to wrap up. More to share soon. Share your thoughts.
Yes.
Contribute and let us know. Right here on LinkedIn, YouTube, please share your thoughts.
Yeah.
We want to hear your feedback because I think
what
it's
worked,
important.
what didn't, right? That's
Yeah, exactly. What worked, what didn't. You know, even what we're doing today. What worked, what didn't. What you know. And I think another part, I didn't hit on this. I won't cover this now, just for time's sake. But one of the things I'll bring up about content creation, live production, and what we're doing. The other conversation that I think we're having as an industry in my space with cloud productions and things is, or just across the board of broadcasting, is monetization. How do we create value when people are engaging in a second screen experience, or like you said, from a live streaming and they're watching, whether it's a sporting event or some type of element? What are we doing to create value in terms of monetization? And what I mean by that is, whether it's an ad you see or the QR code I brought up, right? Those are kind of feature support tools from like the likes of Tagboard, SPX Graphics, and many others. But there's different frames of kind of conversations going on right now. But I think the other part of this, to create an engaging experience for your audience, is to create a way, whether it's a call to action, if you will, for them to respond, right? Whether it's a poll or go to Shopify or do this. I think there's a lot of opportunity here for the businesses and others that when they leverage these solutions like lightweight production or whatever we're doing, is that there are ways you can inject different elements to help support and create more value in terms of your content.
Right, I agree. I think that you're 100% right there. It's, looking ahead, you have to really focus in on, because again, that's how you're going to, I don't want to say sell it, but that's how you're going to sell it to a lot of companies is, how is this going to benefit us, right?
Yep.
How is this going to benefit us? And, if you look at it from a strictly staff-based piece, 3 people pulled off 5 live streams and 4 recordings at NAB. It didn't take a truck. It didn't take, people sitting on site that had to be flown to Vegas, that had to be put up in a hotel. So the efficiency is increased with something like this. And I think that's really where people need to start looking is, not fearing certain elements of it, but how is this going to make my life more efficient, make it easier for me to do my job and really work from there.
No, I think that's Yeah, and I think that to me is key. In a future date, hopefully we'll talk more about monetization. That's an element of LiveU Studio that has the capability to add that outside of just HTML graphics, things like that. Sure. But I think there's another good conversation I see brewing around that whole spot. Podcasting is another area of the market. Mm-hmm. I highlighted that during the show in one of my interviews. I think there's another area of what if the NAB team had, or at NAB you had a podcasting studio people could go use and leverage to do some things. I mean, Tagboard was doing what they were doing, right, in terms of the SiriusXM studio. But I think there's some other opportunities there to think about, creative ways to create value in the content you use or that you create as a business or content creator, whatever it might be. But to help create, that's where the audience is sitting now, mm-hmm. right? People are going to YouTube, they're going to TikTok, they're going to these platforms for a reason, and it's because the transition in terms of traditional broadcasting has changed. Yep. And live streaming has brought about new elements, things like that. So I think there's some great opportunities there to take a look at. So. Okay, in wrapping up, I've covered that. Like, share, let me know on that. That'd be great on my YouTube channel. Thank you. I want to thank you again for everybody. Thank you for your feedback that have given me. I want to thank Andrew once again.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure, JP.
So it's been a real pleasure. So thank you so much.
That's fun.
So thank you to the LiveU team. Thank you to the Tagboard folks and many others that helped give feedback. And just one of the things I would leave before we just end it here is about community. The effort at NAB is not so much just going to a show, it's about community. Mm-hmm. And it's about us talking about what we do and the interactions we have. And I think that is a key part of our industry we need to think about. Yeah. Right? How do we leverage the community that we have? If somebody's out of work and needs a job, leverage the community, right? Mm-hmm. Let's help each other, let's support each other, let's do those things. But I'm just not going on a download note here. I'm going on an up level note of saying, encouraging people, let's think about how we leverage this discussion today and other things that we do around community and doing that, because I think it's a big part of how we get better, right, and how I improve, do my job, right? And whether it's good or bad, let me know. I want people to be authentic and in a nice way.
But I think that you're right. I think that a place like this really allowed us to see that in a lot of ways, just in the conversations. And, people are there and they have to make a living, and that's cool. But, we also had companies that we met that were all about support. I got to thank, Chris from Elgato. I met him for 5 minutes. He found out what I did, and he's like, oh, cool, I'm going to send you 2 of the Elgato units to play around with and keep. And it's like, wait, what? I'm like, I don't even know if I know your last name at this point, and literally okay, it's been 16 minutes since we met, and here you are. And those are the kind of things that you see is when they find, you talk about value, there's also that human value that a lot of people don't always see. And when you get to meet people that see that and appreciate that, that's awesome, especially from a teacher standpoint, because it's not about what we get at the end of the day, it's what I can provide for my students.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's spot on. Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note,
cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. It was a blast.
Thanks, brother. It was a real great blast. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in here. I know it's later in the day on a Friday. A lot of people probably see this after the event. Totally fine. Right. We had to work around a couple other scheduling issues, so that's the way production works, and it's totally fine. That's the beauty. We should be able to, like I said earlier, adapt and pivot, and we did. So thank you, everybody. I want to thank you again. If you have any questions, follow up. And with that, I'm going to switch over to LiveU Studio.